Hey, so today we're going to talk about X-Plane. And X-Plane, I'm a member of the xplane.org forum. I'm pretty active. I check in regularly. I post when I have to, when I feel like it. I don't have thousands of posts, but I try to stay active. I try to answer questions and be a participant. And one of the conversations, the discussions that you always see is X-Plane a game? Is it a simulator? What is X-Plane? Not necessarily what is it, but this whole notion of is it a game or not? And some people are pretty opinionated and feel pretty strongly about that. So I'm going to tell you where I stand on that, and more importantly, I'm going to kind of show you a little bit about how I personally use X-Plane and what I do with it. So I'm kind of like right in the middle of that discussion. Is X-Plane a game? Yes or no? My interest in X-Plane is an interest in aviation. I've been a flight sim fan since way back in literally the days of the Sublogic flight simulator before Microsoft started making flight sim. So I go back a long way with flight sim, and I've always had an interest in aviation and aircraft. And so what I like best about X-Plane is I'm learning how to fly, and I'm learning the basics, which obviously is not quite the same as being in a real aircraft, although I'm working toward that as well. But I'm learning. I'm starting out with general aviation, and I'm kind of building a progression to get better and better as I go along and move on to more and more complicated aircraft. And I think that actually feeds right into this conversation about game or not. So yes, I'm using X-Plane in that way. I'm trying to learn how to fly. I'm learning how to become an aviator. But how do you keep it fresh? And this discussion is always all over there. There's no career mode. There's no plug-in to manage. So how do you keep things fresh? So I would love to have some sort of a career mode, though I don't think it should be built into X-Plane itself. I think about things like on the FSX side, things like Air Hauler and FS Captain and FS Passengers, all three external programs that kind of tied into things. Unfortunately, there is nothing like that available for X-Plane today, and I am nowhere near talented enough to create something like that. However, I am pretty slick when it comes to Google Sheets. So what I've done for myself is I've kind of built my own career mode out of Google Sheets. I'm going to show that to you in a little while. And I'm going to use it as the first in a series of videos to show you what I do with career mode and then moving forward. So how do I plan a flight once I've chosen a flight and have some randomness to where I'm going to go, so I always have some freshness to it. So I'm going to show you that, and then I will take you through some of the tools. Maybe you're somewhat of a beginner like me, just getting started. Maybe this can help you out a little bit. I'm going to show you some things that I use for flight planning. Just a general workflow sort of thing, and we'll see where things go from there. This might become sort of a series of videos from one amateur to another. So first thing, let me show you, and I will explain it a little bit as I go along, but let me show you the Google Sheet that I've built. And this is sort of how I manage my universe within X-Plane. And I'm going to kind of take you through it a little bit, but I'm going to go down and go below the black line here just for a second. So this sort of is my active area down here, and it's a little bit easier to explain, so I'm going to just go through it. I've got a box here for when I actually am running X-Plane and I get my flight clearance. This is just a handy place for me to write down or to type in the things that I'll need to remember to read back my clearance, departure runway, climb, frequency, squawk code, etc. This box here is for filters, and this is an ever-expanding thing. I might add more filters to it, but basically what I'm doing here with filters is when I do randomly choose a flight, I may want to limit it to a certain amount of time or below. So in this case, I've got it set for 3 hours, 45 minutes. So now when I click my button to generate a flight, it'll make sure that this flight will not be longer than 3 hours and 45 minutes. And in fact, that is not necessarily real time, so that kind of feeds into another discussion. And there's a long thread, and I think an ever-increasing thread on the forum today about do you accelerate time or not? And I think that one is probably just as opinionated as is Explain a Game or Not. So I will tell you, I do accelerate time. I like the technical side of things. I like the flight planning that I do. I like this part of what I do. I enjoy getting my aircraft ready to go, checking to be sure that everything is good, taxiing out, departing, and then it's a little boring I flip on autopilot and I might have a 3-hour flight ahead of me, and just kind of watching instruments and looking out the windows. It's not always the most fun thing in the world for me. I like the other more interactive aspects, so I do go ahead and accelerate time. And then normally what I'll do is when I get around time to make my descent, I will come back into real time. So generally I spend about the first 20, maybe 30 minutes, no, not even 30, probably more like the first 20 minutes or so of the flight after I've departed. I'll do that in real time. And then usually anywhere between 15 minutes to a half hour of the tail end of the flight, depending on what my altitude is and descent rate and all that stuff. And then that piece in the middle, I actually do accelerate time. So why do I say that? Well, I've got to figure out a way here to still, if this is going to be of any use to me, I want this to be somewhat accurate. So I've done some calculation here, and basically the way I look at this is I'm going to sit down right now and I'm going to plan out a flight, and including the time for prep and the time for shutdown, this is the maximum amount of time that I want to spend. So I assume that I'm going to have about 35 to 40 minutes of prep. I assume that I'm going to have probably in the area of 20 to 25 minutes of taxiing in and then shutdown and wrapping up my log and all that. So I factor that in right away. I immediately say I've got an hour of just the preliminary stuff. And so what's left is a calculation that every flight that I do keeps track of time for each individual aircraft, and it'll do some miles per hour calculation, but not with real time, with accelerated time. So it'll figure out how many miles an hour I go on average in accelerated time in that aircraft, and it will then go ahead and add that up, and that's the basis for figuring out the max time. So that's a lot to say. It's kind of complicated. And maybe sometimes I feel like flying a particular aircraft. So if I do, I could drop this down here, and any aircraft that I have currently listed will show up in this list that I can choose from to be sure to force that aircraft will be used. Real quick on the aircraft lookup. So this is just a way for me. You might notice I've got a ton of tabs on the bottom there, and I'll go through them in a little while. But the aircraft lookup is really just a way for me to type in a potential destination aircraft, or airport rather, see if it is in fact an add-on airport that I've purchased or downloaded from the org, and whether or not it is a World Traffic or XLife compatible. I'm not going to talk too much about either World Traffic or XLife. They are AI generator, traffic generator type applications. I have them both. I use them both for different reasons. So this will tell me for any particular airport whether or not it is compatible with one or the other, or neither of those. And then finally some statistics here. So currently, and you'll see when we scroll up in a minute, currently the aircraft that's selected is the Twin Comanche. I have flown it 27 times in my world here, which is 28% of my overall flights, and here is overall I've had 98 flights altogether. These are my landings, so I like to keep track of that. In the Twin Comanche, my top 5 landings in terms of vertical speed have been 22, 32, 38, etc. Here are my bottom 5, and 1,000 is my max. So if I have anything bigger than 1,000, which is generally a crash landing, I cap it at 1,000. So I have had some pretty bad landings here. So you'll see here's my bottom 5 in the Twin Comanche. Here are my overall top 5 and bottom 5 landings, and that's just sort of a reference point before I get going to see how things are looking. So let's scroll up to the top here and take a look. So this is currently in a state of a flight has recently been finished, which is why you'll notice my origin and destination airports are both the same. what will happen next is I'm going to click on the Get New Flight button, and if it's got any of these filters set, it will honor them and randomly choose one of my aircraft and an airport to fly to, and it'll validate a few parameters. So before I do that, let me just jump over and tell you a little bit more about what's going on here. So for this particular flight, obviously I'm going to want the origin destination. It'll pick an aircraft for me. The aircraft will have, from another sheet, a value of how much runway it needs. So this is going to be important when I move up to larger regional jets and that sort of thing. I'm certainly not going to want to try to fly a 747 into a municipal airport with a 2,500 foot runway. So this is sort of a fail-safe for that. If it happens to choose a jet or large aircraft and an airport that has a very short runway, it will skip that and move on until it finds an airport that can actually that plane can actually land in. Next is, for this aircraft, what is its ceiling? I like to see that right here, because when I get into flight planning, I'll know right away what's my maximum altitude. I'll have a random amount of passengers. This can be anywhere from 1 through whatever the passenger capacity of the chosen aircraft is. And then these two fields at the bottom here are for world traffic. So once we get into world traffic a little bit later, or if we get into world traffic, this is telling me that this particular airport, my departure airport, has 199 general aviation flights a day and 2 military flights a day on average. And we punch that number into world traffic a little bit later on, so it can generate a seemingly somewhat realistic amount of flights for my departure and destination airports. Then for the destination, it'll give us a little information here. What is the longest runway? So that'll get compared against the runway that the aircraft needs. How far away is it? And obviously origin and destination are the same here, so the answer is 0. But this is going to be looking for, is this beyond the maximum range of the aircraft? What is the approximate time of this flight going to be? And this is in real time. And remember how I said before I had an hour for prep and shutdown. So in this case, this flight is going to take 0 time because I'm starting and ending in the same place, but that's that hour that's automatically factored in. And here for this particular airport, there are, again, same airport, 199 GA and 2 military, and I just like to know how many times I've been there, so I've been there once. My origin airport is world traffic capable. My destination airport is world traffic capable. It will tell me world traffic or XLife, or it'll be blank, which means I don't know yet, and if that's the case, I will have to figure that out before I go, because I've obviously not gone through all 800 and some odd airports in my world to figure that out, so we kind of figure it out as we go along. Some information about my place in the world. My rank, I really only use this number for how many planes are in my hangar, and as my rank improves, I add new aircraft, and generally they will be in new classes. So right now, for example, I am only at the stage where I can fly twin engine props or single engine props. So my top 3 aircraft here are single engine props: the Cessna, the Piper Arrow, and the Bonanza. And then my twin engines are the Twin Comanche, the Diamond 62, and the Baron 58. So that's a little look at my rank. It basically is just used to do some crazy lookups and figure out which aircraft come onto the front page and all that stuff. Here's how many hours in total. And this is not calculating correctly. I can see that right now because my total hours here is 104.8 and my total hours here is saying 82.9. So I need to fix that. Just discovered that. Total for this aircraft is 26.9, so that's correct. Total for this class, which is the twin engine prop, is 44.2, so that is correct. Yeah, so actually all this really needs to be is let's just fix this while we're at it here. All right. Okay, so now my total hours, 104.8. Okay, anyway, so for this particular aircraft, my average vertical speed at landing is 217 feet per minute, and that is true. And for this class, 213 feet per minute. Looking at the class, single engine prop is a combination of the 3 aircraft of that type. Twin engine prop is a combination of the 3 aircraft of that type. Just keeping track of my day hours, my night hours, my total hours, how many flights, and my average VSI. So average VSI is what I've chosen to use for my sort of my level up, if you will. For a particular, any individual aircraft, I need to have an average VSI of under 225 feet per minute, in addition to some times, some hours and total flights, before I can move on to the next aircraft and ultimately to the next class. So, for example, right now, the 172, I've got 118. The PDA, I've got 179, the Bonanza, 428. So altogether, I've got an average VSI of 151. I now can move on, and I have, to the next class because my average is low enough. This class, I'm not yet there, so I will need to keep flying twin engine props until I get this down below 200, and once I do, it will not be red anymore, and I can add the first of the next class to my fleet, which is, I can tell you already, I know is going to be the Cessna 208, and that'll be the first single engine turboprop. And then we'll go to twin engine turboprops, we'll go to individual jets, we'll go to business jets, we'll go to twin engine business jets, we'll go to regional, and so on and so forth until we work our way up to the big guys, which will probably take a while. I also have some, keep track of day and night hours in each aircraft, total hours and total flights, and again, I've got some formatting in here that will tell me if any of these are lower than they need to be. So, for example, the 28R, I do not have enough night hours, and night is figured as a percentage of day hours, basically. So the next time I fly this aircraft, it's going to have to be a night flight, and same thing for the Twin Comanche. So once I've made it to my total number of hours, enough night hours, enough of them being night hours, my total number of flights, and a VSI under 225 for any individual aircraft, that will allow me to move up to the next class. And this also is not correct, so I'm finding a couple errors here. May as well fix them while I can. This conditional formatting applies to my 2 original. Oh, actually, yeah, I was right. The reason it's not counting for the Baron is because the Baron is, and the same thing for the 33. So my rules, my house rules, is that I have a minimum of 2 aircraft of each class that need to meet my criteria. Should I purchase another aircraft or feel that I want to fly something else, I can add it in here to keep track of it, but it does not count as one that is requiring me to meet certain standards. So, for example, if I were to fly the 28 and somehow have a horrific landing that brought the VSI back up over 225, I would now have to go back and only fly this as my highest plane that I could fly until I get it back down, and then again I can add these back in as we go. So that's kind of sort of how my world works. Hope that makes a little bit of sense. And on my right hand side here, I just keep track of a little bit of a workflow when I'm actually getting ready to start up. I'll explain this. I actually have a batch file that I use to start X-Plane, and it's going to do things like copy clouds from one of the many cloud sets that I've accumulated over the years. It'll set various parameters. It'll launch FS Global Real Weather. It'll launch X-Organizer. It'll launch Pilot to ATC. Basically all of my my supplemental programs. I just have one place to go, click go, and it loads all my stuff up for me. Choose my plane and departure, download my weather, file my flight plan, or generate my flight plan, get some charts, And then once the cockpit opens, I have another series of things that I do, and two things that I haven't shown you yet. So for my destination airport, this is actually a hyperlink. So in this case, we'll say the destination is going to change when I generate a new flight. We'll say the destination is Kilo Juliet November X-ray. If I hover over here and click it, it is actually going to open in AirNav this particular airport, so I can read the information, make sure it's open, understand my runways, fuel that's available, and all the information that I need to know, as well as procedures for this airport. The other link here is this map. So you notice, before I go too far, I keep track of what the location is that each aircraft is in, and this is updated automatically. Once I record a flight, at the end of that flight, this will dynamically update the location that this aircraft is parked in. So every time I start a flight, I will be departing from the last airport that that particular aircraft landed in. So this map link is really just a quick way for me to pop up and see a map of where my aircraft are. And these are color-coded. The brighter green ones are my single-engine props. The darker green ones are the twin-engine props. And I don't know, I'll do blue or something for single-engine turboprops when I get there. But it just gives me a way to see, where my stuff is. And of course, I could hover over one. And so this is my Piper. The Archer is at Kilo Papa Kilo Bravo. Okay, so yeah, I think that covers just about everything on the main page here. Quick look at some other tabs on this sheet. Logbook tab. So logbook tab keeps track of all of my flights, and these are recorded automatically. Yep, a couple of crashes here, had an emergency, had another crash here. So these are recorded automatically. It'll ask me some questions to fill in, and then boom, this gets taken care of. And I keep these, I probably don't even need to keep this on this sheet anymore. Before I moved these to the front sheet, I was keeping them here. Same information on the front about the aircraft and the classes. Aircraft, so these are my aircraft, and currently I am only up to here being enabled. I mentioned earlier the 208 is going to be next, the Pilatus PC-12 will come after that, and then you probably move on to the 1900 and the B200. Maybe we'll pick something else, don't know. But this is where some of the aircraft data and calculations are being pulled from, and ranges and ceilings and all that good stuff, what their location is. I use this minimum distance field that I am not going to fly a plane, or I'm not going to do a flight any shorter than this distance in this particular aircraft. So that's that sheet. Airports sheet. So this sheet is keeping track of I've got about 850 or so airports in here, and this is where I'm keeping track of their locations. So latitude and longitude are used for distance calculations. Longest runway, you saw that on the first page. The GA and military amount of flights per day. Here's where is it X-Life or World Traffic compatible, and this is add-ons. So basically all these fields are used for the information on this sheet. I have a backup tab for airports. Doesn't really matter. I have an airport reference tab, and that doesn't really matter either. To do is just sort of a running checklist of things that I want to do within X-Plane. Maybe I'll find a scenery on the org that I want to install or something like that. So that just helps me keep track of those things. Has nothing at all to do with my UI. Same thing for add-ons. It just helps me to keep track of where all my add-ons are located, what versions they are, and that sort of thing. I use a sheet for testing in case I've got other calculations or something like that to figure out, and I'm just playing around with something on this last sheet right here. So those are the sheets that make this thing up. So how do I use it? All right, so here we are. Ready to get started, sitting down for the first time today, say, all right, I want to fly somewhere. This is the sheet that I'm going to open up, and I'm going to answer two questions before I get started. Do I want to limit this flight to any particular amount of time? and is there a particular aircraft that I want to select to ensure that I am flying it this time around. And so in this case, I'm going to leave both of these pretty much as they are. Yeah, let's just leave that pretty much alone. So I am going to go ahead and click Get New Flight. When I do that, a few things happen, and this is... I have all of this code, and it gets kind of funky and crazy, but I basically have all of this code where I can, this is what does all the work, all the magic behind it. That will do all my finding of a random new flight. It does all of my recording of my flight information. It updates my logbook, it updates my map, it does basically all of that stuff that these two, or really four, buttons do right here. Get New Flight is going to get me a flight. Record Flight is at the end, answer some questions to fill out my log entry and update various different things. And up and down are my ranks. So once I've cleared... Right now, the only thing I have left for my twins that I need to do, well, a couple things. My PA-30, my twin Comanche, I've got to get some more night hours in. That is red. Can't move on until that one is green. And for the class overall, I've got to get this down under 200. So once I've satisfied both of them, I will go ahead and hit up. It will bring in the next aircraft from my list on this sheet, which is the 208, and make it available for me to fly. Alright, what else? Guess that's about it. So when I hit Get New Flight, it's going to look at my filters, max time, aircraft, and there's also some logic built in that the current last aircraft on the list, in this case it's the Baron, is always going to get a higher chance that it will be selected for the flight. In fact, it's going to be a 50-50 chance. And the reason for that is because, generally speaking, it would be expected that that plane or that aircraft is going to have the least amount of flights, or near the least amount of flights, and that it will also help toward working toward the class that I'm currently at, to moving ahead from that class. So when I hit this button, there's going to be a 50-50 chance that the Beech is chosen for this flight, and then all of the others, there are 5 others, they will have an equally 20% chance. If it's a no for this one, it'll pick evenly weighted one of the other 5. Alright, here we go. Let's go ahead and see what we get. So it's running my script. It's cycling through airports until it finds one that meets all of my criteria, and it is done. So it chose the Beech, 50-50 chance, chose it, said good. It filled in my current location is Kilo Mike Quebec Bravo, and it's chosen a destination for me, Kilo Alpha Lima X-Ray. So first thing I normally would do here is say, okay, let's take a look at Kilo Alpha Lima X-Ray. Alright, this is Thomas C. Russell Field in Alabama. Good to know. Runway is 5,400 feet. I'm good there, and it wouldn't have allowed this to have been chosen if I weren't good. I'm going to be carrying 1 passenger on this flight. Now, this field actually changes randomly, so it may change a few times before I actually go to do this flight, and I'm fine with that. I don't really care about this number until I start doing my actual flight planning and really more my fuel planning. The other thing that I noticed here is I've got delete set up for this airport. So for some reason, I have decided that I no longer want to fly in or out of this airport, and I think the reason that I've chosen for this is that there was some error with the scenery loading or something, that it's not a catastrophic error, but it either doesn't look right or something like that. So anyway, next time it is chosen and it says delete in here, I will go in and delete it and then choose a new flight. Okay, so for my destination, it's 509 miles away. My approximate time in total for all of my prep and my flight, including my accelerated time and my shutdown, it'll take me about 3.5 hours. So it actually right now is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It will be about 7:30 this evening when I am done with this, should I start right now. There are 83 general aviation and 8 military flights per day out of this airport, and I have not visited this airport yet. So when I load this thing up in X-Plane and I tell World Traffic to go ahead and generate my traffic, it's going to say one of two things. It's either going to say no taxi network exists, which means it cannot create ground routes, in which case this will mean nothing. Or it will say that no ground routes exist yet and give me the opportunity to create them so that there will be AI traffic at that airport. Okay, so that's about it. We now have a flight ready to go. We know where we're leaving from, where we're going to. We've got some information about how long it's going to take, and we are going to be ready to move on to the next stage, which is going to be preparing the flight plan and doing that work. So we're going to end this video here, call this the first one of the series, and then we will move on to flight planning for the next video. Hope this was somewhat useful for you.